Welcome back to another episode of the Seafarer Social Podcast. And I am extremely honored to be here with Captain André as my guest today. I've been trying to get this going with Captain André for a very long time, but as many of you who will be listening to this and watching this know, he's been a very busy man. And finally, I'm able to have an hour of his time. So I'm very, very thankful for that. Firstly, thank you, Captain, for taking the time to speak with me. And I guess the best place to start is, how's things?
Yeah, pretty good. Carl, my apologies for not being able to do this sooner. As you know, I've been very busy over the last few years, but the honor's all mine, actually. Be on your podcast. Wow. Pinnacle of my career. Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
bet.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Life's about as good as it can be. Just hope it stays the same. Doing really, really well. Yeah, and absolutely delighted to be here and have a chat today. Thank you for
Well,
inviting me.
no, it's absolutely my pleasure. So, I entered the maritime industry just 2, 3 years ago, actually. So I'm still extremely new. And I remember coming out to Connecticut back in 2023 for CMA shipping and listening to these panel discussions. And I can't remember the exact topic that you were covering at the time, but I just walked away with, I need to speak to this guy. This guy has a demeanor around him, which is extremely interesting. As soon as you spoke, you naturally demanded the attention of the audience, which I think is an extremely important leadership quality. And then once I'd done some research into your background, I thought, okay, this is someone I need to not just speak to now, but get on the podcast, because I think there's a lot of value that your experience and your knowledge could provide, especially to the next generation of seafarers. But before we get into that, I think it's probably best to start from the beginning. So how did this start for you? How did the maritime industry, how did this career as a seafarer all begin?
That's a hard one to answer because I was born on the island of Sark in the Channel Islands back in the UK. So it's an island of 3 miles by 1.5. 500 people, no cars, no tarmac roads. It's just a rock in the ocean, only serviced by a boat, no airport. So I was sort of born on the edge of the sea as such. I come from a long line of bakers and pastry cooks. My
Wow.
father, and his father before him were all bakers, so I certainly didn't follow the maritime trade there. My mother's father was a seafarer. He was a fisherman on the island of Sark, but he also piloted vessels. He piloted the ships that came in with all the passengers, and he was well known. He was the very first pilot. And I was honoured at one point in my career to be made a Sark pilot. I qualified as a Sark pilot, a pilot for the island of Sark, and actually followed in my grandfather's footsteps there, which was lovely. But I'm told by the age of 4 that I'd decided I'd go to sea. Of
Wow.
course, at that tender age, I was going straight to be captain. So it was quite a shock at 18 to find that I had to sail as a deck cadet. But I never actually wavered from that. That was my desire, and I was going to sea. And my whole life was focused around that. If I'm told, I mean, obviously I don't remember it, but I'm told if somebody asked me what I was going to do when I grow up, I said I'm going to be a captain on a ship. And it went on from there. The age of 8, I started spending all my spare time on lobster fishing boats on Sark. And then at the age of 11, I passed a school qualification, the 11 plus. And my father decided rather than break the family up, we all moved to Guernsey, 25 square mile Channel Island. And there was a small little ship that ran between Guernsey and Sark, sole provider of cargo, 100 tons of cargo, 138 passengers, everything from livestock to dead bodies went to Sark on that vessel. And the captain took me under his wing, my first mentor, my first real mentor. And from the age of 12, I was deck boy on his ship. Signed on at 16. He got me onto bigger coasters when I was 17 and 18. Did some tall ship sailing with the Sail Training Association. And by the time I left high school at 18, I had 6 months sea time in my
Wow.
book. Yeah. So really, I didn't choose to go to sea. I believe the sea chose me.
Nice. And what was your first big contract?
My first, I went deep sea with Cunard Shipping Services Ltd. So that
Okay.
was the cargo division of the famous Cunard line. They had 38 ships when I went to sea, and I had a wonderful cadetship, great foundation of knowledge, super variety of ships, and an excellent training program as a cadet. And I stayed with them until 1989, when we were down to 6 ships, dead man's shoes. There was no promotion. I'd just been promoted second mate. And so I decided to leave and move into the coastal trade. And just being at the right place at the right time, I had command of a hydrofoil in '89 at the age of 27, which is a very steep learning curve for somebody so young and inexperienced, but we survived.
Yeah, for sure. It's an extremely steep learning curve, but yeah, I think it's impressive for sure. I mean, when you started working at sea, what kind of crew did you have? Was it a multinational crew from the offset? Were you meeting Filipinos, Indians, or
No, not at all. Most of the ships were all British crew.
okay,
So crew and officers. Then I did spend time on our tankers, which was actually my favourite vessels. I was very fortunate. They had Indian crew, Goanese stewards and cooks, so as they could cook the pork because they were Christian, and the rest were from other parts of India. So that was actually my first experience, the multinational crew. And then I did do a spell on a Nigerian storage tanker, luckily only 3 months when I was third mate. And that was quite an experience. That had Nigerian crew, Italian mooring masters, and British officers stationed in the Pennington oil field in Nigeria, which was, I have to say, an experience I hope I never have again. It was pretty brutal out there.
why so?
Again, the politics at the time, the power was going back to the tribal chiefs, as I understand it. This is 1984. They overthrew the president, Deco, I think his name was. They found him in a packing case in Heathrow Airport.
Jeez.
They were yeah, it was wild out there. The witch doctors were very, very prevalent, putting spells on families and charging $1,000 to lift them. I saw a seafarer killed on a supply boat alongside us, and the repercussions from the family and that. And they actually killed the master of the supply boat in retribution. Yeah, it was wild. Wild. What an experience for a 22-year-old.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from interviewing many of seafarers, it's definitely a career that opened your eyes to sometimes how brutal human beings can be.
Very much so. When you sail, of course, at 21, 22, our whole view on life is very different as it is now. But you and I, both fathers now, I'm sure you've seen the change recently in your
Yeah,
life and your outlook, and me just become a grandfather. Things change, but we were a lot wilder then as well, and could cope with these things a lot harder. But when you see what's going on in the world, particularly in the Red Sea, places like that, the Black Sea off Ukraine, and what seafarers are having to put up with now, it really is brutal in places. Off Somalia again, kicking off.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the other things that really shocks me that I've started to raise a lot of awareness to is the criminalization of seafarers as well. This is a huge problem. Did
Yes,
you hear about the situation with the seafarer? I think he was a Croatian guy.
I'm not sure which one you're
Yeah,
referring to, Carl.
recently there was a master mariner who was arrested, I believe, in Croatia due to some of the cargo, and he's stuck. He's stuck,
Yeah,
and this
yeah.
happens literally all the time, and they get forgotten.
I think we have to balance that. I still believe that seafaring is a wonderful way of life. It's an
Yeah,
awesome career, particularly now with the changes that are going on. And I think we have to tend to sensationalize the bad things. A ship stuck sideways in the Suez Canal really did make
yeah,
headlines. But the ships, the 100-odd ships a day that go through the transit the canal safely don't make any headlines at all. And the seafarers that take them through and the pilots. I think we have to balance this. But criminalization of the master is a huge problem. And as a seafarer, we're very, very conscious of that, what we do. I think it's so terribly unfair when they find drugs, in one of the holds of a 6-hold or 5-hold bulk carrier. Clearly the master does not know that they're there,
yeah.
yet he's up the road in handcuffs. It's incredibly sad that is the knee-jerk reaction, and we've seen this particularly latterly.
Yeah,
We have to arrest somebody, so let's arrest the captain because they're in charge of the ship.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a huge shame, but I think you did mention something at the start there, which I think is really interesting, and that is that quite often when we have these discussions, although these seafarers need a lot more help, but typically when we talk about shipping, it is typically the bad side. So I'd like to flip that around. And given that you are someone that's had a prolonged seafaring career, can you tell me about some of the best stories, best moments the industry has had where you have reflected and said, I am proud to be a seafarer?
Oh my goodness, that's always a hard one. I've never not been proud to be a seafarer. I have to say that. If people ask me what I do, I say I'm a seafarer. That's the exact words I use. And, if I put down my job title, I'll put Master Mariner. Even though I'm a mooring master now / pilot, I put down Master Mariner as my profession. And I'm incredibly proud to do that. When have I seen, I don't think I'm sure I'm not sure you were even born, 1982, the Falklands War, when they took so many ships up from trade. They wouldn't let me go. I was a cadet on an Indian crude tanker and they wouldn't let me go. I was very disappointed. So I joined the Royal Naval Reserve as soon as I could after that, because of that. But when you saw the seafarers step up and sail to the Falklands, those brave, brave seafarers that went there, and those that didn't come back as well. And I particularly think of the Atlantic Conveyor, which was part of my company, ACL vessel, part of Cunard, that was lost in the Falklands. It was hit by an Exocet missile and sunk. And I still know some of the seafarers that were on that. I was very fortunate. I was third mate for a long time in the brand new one that replaced it. So I think of those, and that makes you proud. I don't think I've ever been prouder of seafarers than during COVID. The way seafarers stepped up, the unsung heroes, everyone standing on their balcony, clapping for the nurses and the doctors and those at the front line who did a wonderful job. But Lord, it was tough for seafarers, and they were on the ships 15, 18 months, some of them couldn't get off. And those seafarers that were at home, not being paid, wondering how the hell they're going to support their families. I've never been prouder of seafarers than then, I don't think, what they did, and still not even recognised or respected.
Yeah, I think the title of the unsung heroes is unfortunately the correct title. And I think one of the things I'd like to be a part of is somehow developing campaigns, advertising campaigns that bridge the gap between the wider public and the seafaring lifestyle community. It's completely and utterly, not enough people know how important the role of the seafarer is within our lives.
Yeah, it's so difficult. My wife came up with the idea. She said, wouldn't it be lovely if places like Walmart just put a sign, a picture of the ship that brought certain products to America, on their shelves, just a little picture of the ship that actually carried it in, just to show people. And she wanted to do that in COVID, but nobody had taken it up. People just don't understand where 92% of their goods come from, or how they're transported to the countries, no matter where you are in the world. They just don't understand. If you say, where does your gas for your car come from? Well, it comes from Walmart. How does it get there? Oh, I don't know. Pipeline, I expect. It just comes out the pump.
Yeah, I ran for one of the maritime charities for the London Marathon. And when you run for a charity, you have to raise a minimum amount of money. And when I originally signed up to do it, I was, at the time I was obviously working in maritime, and a lot of my maritime colleagues helped out with donations. But when I reached out to my friends, my network, they were like, well, what's a seafarer? If I was running for Heart Foundation or something like that, they'd be all over it because they can immediately recognize how that affects their lives.
Yeah.
But I really struggled to actually raise the full amount because although there are obviously people that will donate because it's me, to be able to connect with the cause to the wider public was really difficult. And I thought to myself, God, even the charities must have a really hard time with fundraising because there's just not enough awareness.
No, there isn't. But it's an ongoing problem. I guess it's always been so. Although it's very hard for me coming from small islands that are, very much sea-based. You've got it
Yeah.
lapping at your feet on one of them. It's, seafaring is. But there was a lot of respect for seafarers. Now, what I would say is that merchant marine here is far more recognized than it is in other parts of the world. It is understood that there is a merchant marine and people do know what it is. A lot of merchant mariners here, they're also reserve officers. They go through various training. It's quasi-military at the colleges, and they'll probably hate me saying that, but the seafarers the cadets are all in uniform. They all parade. I've been so lucky to visit Maritime and SUNY in New York, and there's been parades there for me. I've been guest of honor, particularly in SUNY. It was really, really special. And you see the cadets turned out. They're incredibly proud of being a cadet. They're proud of their uniforms, and we see that at sea today. Very, very irate when I hear some people talking about cadets today and youth today and the like. When I see the cadets on board the ships, they are the best, brightest, smartest generation we have ever seen, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm talking from 40 years at sea. They truly are special, and they are incredibly proud to be cadets. When I go to the colleges, as I think over my 2 years as president of the Nautical Institute, my main focus has been on cadets, the training of cadets, the promotion of cadets, and the benefit of having cadets on board. And I've literally met thousands over the years, sometimes rooms full with 200-300, all in uniform, all smart, and all really proud to be cadets, particularly in places like India. It's been heartwarming to see.
Yeah, and I guess that's another one of those moments where you yourself, again, have been reminded just how proud you are to be a seafarer when you look at this next generation of men and women that are so excited about the possibilities that are ahead of them.
Proud and humbled at
Yeah,
times because of, and challenged because of what we have to do while we're here. As the current generation of seafarers, although my generation is falling off the perch as they sort of retire, move into retirement, or go ashore. But we have so much to do. We have to pass our knowledge on. We have a traditional duty as master mariners to pass our knowledge on to the next generation. I truly believe that. And, we're still in a position of influence at the moment.
yeah.
And we have to come and do podcasts like things like this, to actually raise the profile and to do our bit to help the next generation of seafarers. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I want to dig a little deeper into mentoring as a whole. But before I do that, you mentioned that a large part of your position when you were with the Nautical Institute was going around to the academies around the world and meeting some of these cadets. And as you know, currently I'm sat here in the Philippines in Manila, the heart of seafaring. Tell me a little bit about your experience when you were in Manila, visiting some of the schools out here and speaking to some of the Filipino cadets.
Well, the only one I got to in Manila, because I visited twice. My first visit was just at the tail end of COVID, and it was incredibly brief. It was also my flight was 36 hours late as well, so it was very difficult. So it was a real flying visit the first time. Excuse me. But my second visit, I had a little bit time, and that was in tail end of June this year, when I handed over the presidency to Captain Trevor Bailey. And I got to visit MARP, the college there, Manila Academy, Captain Santos and his team there. They're fantastic. They really are. But what we did in Manila is we had, if I remember rightly, it was about 25 cadets at our conference there. We had 2-day conference. And obviously, from what I'd been doing, it was the culmination of my presidency and working with the cadets. And we just had a fantastic team there. And we had a panel discussion at the end, and I chaired the panel discussion. And it just opened it up. These cadets were so engaged, so relaxed and able to speak, and they just spoke from the heart. And, it was just so good to listen to them. We also had group discussions, myself and another member of the Nautical Institute, a younger engineer, a member of our Younger Members Council, Shikaban. He led one of the discussions, I led the other, and really engaging the cadets into their hopes, their expectations, and their fears and challenges of what they've got coming as cadets, and opening it up to those who have sailed as cadets and those who haven't, and getting the two talking. And that's an incredibly powerful experience where you get cadets sharing their knowledge with cadets, those who've been to sea and those who haven't, and, talking about what life really is life at sea. So we did that in Manila. That was incredible. But I've just got to share one moment with you that stopped me in my tracks. I think it was 12 cadets in the front, and we had a wonderful panel discussion. And we were talking to them, and we went round from one to the next, right at the very end, and we asked them how much they wanted to be paid as a cadet per month. Generally, the opinion, to cut a long story short, the opinion was round about $700, except the penultimate cadet I came to, an engineer cadet, who turned around to me and he said, "Sir, I don't need to be paid. I just need to get on a ship and get my sea time." And that it brought lumps to our throats. It set the hair on, and it still does, the hair on the back of my neck stands up when I think of that cadet, even prepared to forgo his salary if he could just get on a ship, please, and get his sea time. For goodness sake, we've got to do something with these cadets and get them to sea. We need them.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very, very important subject, and probably one that deserves a whole podcast in itself. But one of the things I learned, because for me, this is where my maritime career started. I lived in the Philippines for almost 2 years, and I spent a lot of time interviewing and speaking to cadets, active seafarers. And one of the things I've really learned over my time being in the Philippines is that it's not just about the reason why the highest labor market for seafaring is the Philippines is not just because of labor costs. It's because the seafaring is so closely related to their culture.
It's in their soul.
Yeah, it's probably something that you have similar. They're all island people. There's 7,000 plus islands here, right? They're archipelagos, so they have a connection to the sea which is so deep. It's this is the career for them, and I think that it probably relays as to the answer that cadet gave you, is because this isn't just about the money. This is part of them, and I also think they are absolutely fantastic seafarers as well. Fantastic seafarers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But I know, as well as you do, that there is a huge problem when it comes to surplus here. A lot of these schools are businesses, and it's a shame that sometimes a cadet will be given promises that are empty. And I'd like to see in the future something done, especially with the shipping community, where they recognize this and put some resources together to figure out a way of fixing this, because there should not be conversations around retention and stuff like that when there are literally thousands of cadets desperate to get on board a ship after surpassing 2-3 years of studies and their parents having to take loans and selling things to get them through. It's a really big problem that needs to be spoken about more, and I'm hoping the Magna Carta will help improve this situation. But so much needs to be done from the shipping industry as a whole.
I think the shipping industry just has to, swallow. I mean, the cost is negligible. And I get this thrown at me regularly, cadets are too expensive, and they're just not. You take the cost of a brand new dual fuel VLCC, you're talking in the term of 120 million, give or take. The cost of a cadet, you can probably get them through for about $10,000 a year. That's 0.00025% of a cost of that VLCC. Or if you put it in perspective, a VLCC is 336 meters long, and we are talking 8.2 centimeters of that ship. The cost is negligible, but the benefits of having a cadet on board that ship, particularly with the alternative fuels now, that cadet will know the ship back to front when they come off it. It's part of their studies, it's ingrained in their training, And if it's a good ship, a good company, they'll be encouraged to do this. I know from my personal experience, I went on a 33 tank product carrier, an old product carrier, when I was a cadet, third phase. So I'd just been to college. I went back to sea after my middle phase at college, and I was on this. So I'd got already a year's sea time in. And, I drew the pipelines. I knew that ship. I knew where every valve was. I knew that ship back to front. I got qualified, got my second mate's ticket. I got appointed to a ship which was the sister ship of the one I'd been on as a cadet. They were identical. I was first trip, third mate. The chief officer was first trip mate, first trip in that rank as mate. The second mate was what they called in those days a professional second mate. That was the only license he'd ever get. A great guy, knew the ship really well. And there I was, brand new third mate, but I knew my way around that ship. It was just a different name. And that's because I'd been a cadet. So we successfully carried 9 grades of cargo in 33 tanks and were the sole supplier of oil to Tahiti for the winter. Kicking and screaming, they took me off that boat.
Yeah, I can imagine. But to go back to the original point, I don't understand why the shipping companies can't see this long vision with investing in cadets. From your experience, why do you think that they can't understand the longevity and the return on investment by investing in cadets for tomorrow's purpose?
Carl, if I could answer that question, I'd solve the problem in one. I really would, because there's so many shipping companies out there. And I'm told shipping companies, keep talking about the shortage of officers.
Yeah.
Of good officers. Well, if you want the best, the very best, train them yourself. You're not going to get better than that because you've got the best company. So train them yourself. And then they say, well, they'll leave. Well, why are they going to leave? Because somebody's going to pay them a few bucks more. So does that not answer that question? And I don't wish to sound cynical because it is a huge problem. I'm working with cadets at the moment in Asia and trying to get them on ships. And I can't do it. And it's because the system is wrong, as far as I'm concerned, or they were ill-advised when they took up their cadetships. But this is only something I've found out since I've done the research as president. But to me, it's beholden on the colleges, it's beholden on the companies. Everybody is involved in this. No cadet should do a maritime degree or maritime training course, diploma course, whichever they choose, and then be denied time on a ship or not be able to get time on a ship. That to me is wrong. The colleges should not be allowed to do that because it's part of the course that they've joined. Yes, they've got their degree. I know one cadet in particular very well who's got his degree. He's got his BSc, he's passed it well. He can't get on the ship at the moment. We're working hard with him. But he should not be in that situation because it's part of the package, to me, the STCW qualification. Every cadet that wants to go to sea should have the opportunity to sail. And I believe that comes from government level, and I hope in time we can convince IMO of this. That is my personal aim for the future. With the Nautical Institute, we've got NGO status and the support, and I hope we're going to get the support of the industry and the support of IMO. And, with us, the way I see IMO going at the moment, I'm very, very encouraged from what I've seen in the last few months.
Likewise, actually. I really like
the Secretary General truly believes in seafarers.
He is fantastic.
Actually, he came to the Nautical Institute and spoke to us a few weeks ago. He took time out to actually come and talk to us, and seeing him taking selfies with our Younger Members Council and our younger members. And then we visited IMO and he just happened to be there. And the time he spent with all of us, not just the younger members, but when I see on social media, younger members, your brand new captains, your brand new chief engineers, and even your cadets and your third mates and second mates. And they've got a picture with the Secretary General of IMO. Doesn't that say a lot for both? I know how proud they were of that, but, bless him. What he did that day for our seafarers, was just awesome.
Yeah, he is a fantastic character, and I've listened to him talk publicly a few times, and I really like, and I find it extremely refreshing how he is focusing on a people-first approach.
Yeah.
And I think it's about time. I'm also in the same ship as you, that I'm heavily encouraged that the IMO are going to do a lot of good, especially with this new Secretary General.
Yeah, and that's no disrespect to the people that have gone before. You
Yeah,
know,
sure.
did fantastic jobs, but the focus is hopefully
It's all a
changing
building
now.
block. It's all a
It's
building
it's
block.
it's a foundation, that we build on, and IMO is a really strong foundation that we build on. But just seeing the way the focus is changing now, and at the Nautical Institute, we have a new representative. He's joined us about 9 or 10 months ago, and he's so passionate, he's so committed to this job, and he's doing such a good job there for us, and our NGO status. Yeah, I'm really excited for the future. I have to say, I'm not fearful for the future at all, and for seafarers. I think it's a brilliant career. It's changing, it's evolving, but then the industry has, from day one when seafarers first went to sea, it's always evolved, and the new generation are at such an exciting time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Very well said. I was going to ask you what motivated you originally to publish the Mentoring at Sea, the 10-minute challenge, but I actually think it's quite obvious what motivated you. So instead, I'm going to ask you about the future of mentoring. So I'd like to know from your side, how do you envision the future of mentoring for seafarers?
I hope that we planted the seed in 2012 with the first book, and I'm not going to take credit for it because that'd be arrogant. But in those days, the word mentoring or mentor wasn't used. It was, I wouldn't say derogatory term, but it was people shied away from it. Now you hear mentoring mentioned all the time. Now, I don't say that's down to what we did. As I say, that would be conceited of me. But we've certainly helped with that at the Nautical Institute, and I've been
Yeah.
so fortunate having the support of the Nautical Institute as a member. Well, I've been a member, actually, it's 40 years this year that I've been a member, because I couldn't afford it until I got promoted third mate. 1984, I joined them, and I'm still there. But they've been incredibly supportive to me through my career, and particularly with the mentoring project, which we've been working on since about 2008 with their support. How do I see it progressing? I'd love to see it as a culture on board. I don't want to see it formalized. The mentoring I'm talking about, Carl, is very different to the traditional long-term mentors. And we've all had mentors in our life.
Yeah.
I think everybody, if the truth were known, has had mentors. I do this experiment, if you like, in conferences when I'm speaking. I ask, talk about mentoring, explain what mentoring is, and then I ask people to think of a mentor, somebody in their life. And it could have been a stranger, somebody they knew very well, it doesn't matter, a captain, a bosun, whatever, chief engineer, but somebody in their life who made a huge difference, who imparted a piece of experiential knowledge to them that made a difference in their lives. And people think about this, and most people can think of somebody. And they think of somebody and they start smiling. And all of a sudden, you can have a couple of hundred people in front of you, and the whole room lights up. It's an incredible experience from the front, because people are thinking about that mentor in their life, somebody who made a difference, who took time to show them how to do something, and can have an incredible effect. And we start from there. All I'm asking is that people on board, they generate, and people ashore as well, but everybody just generates this culture of mentoring. Take 10 minutes out of their busy lives to show somebody how to do something, to share a piece of knowledge, or even better, to let them do something under their guidance. So perhaps a master on a bridge, and you're coming in to anchor your vessel, and you let the chief officer do it. It's not a test. You're going to have to be up there anyway as captain, but you let the mate do it, and let the mate bring it into anchor and plan the anchorage and actually do the anchorage and gain the experience. And then you spend just a couple of minutes debriefing it. It's going to take no more of your time than 10 minutes, the time to drink a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And we can all take, that time out of our lives when we're working 12, 14 hours a day. I believe we can all share 10 minutes.
Yeah, very well said. I remember speaking to a guy called Captain Thomas Lindegaard Madsen, who's part of the board of directors for Maersk, but also an active seafarer. And he said something to me which really stood out. And he said, part of my day to day now, while I'm on board, is I just speak to the crew, and he said I make a conscious effort to completely eliminate the idea that the crew need to walk up to the bridge, because there is some kind of pressure attached to that. It's a nervous trip. So he said I make the effort every single morning to
like
do that route around the vessel and sit with everybody in their environment. And he said, and the way he described it is shoot the shit. We talk about
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Over a cup of coffee. There's another
Yeah.
captain. There's another captain, an Indian guy who I spoke to, a guy called Captain Sinha, who said something to me which I just loved as well. He said, whenever I have a new seafarer come on board, I ask them for their name. They give me their name, and I say, "What does your mother call you?" And that is how he speaks to them. He calls them by the name that their mother calls them. And I just think these little things are all part of the same puzzle, which is leadership skills.
But it's also mentoring. You think about
and
it.
mentoring. Sorry, forgive me.
You
And
see,
mentoring as
no,
well.
I'm not correcting you, Carl. I'm saying it's more than leadership. You think about that captain and the knowledge. I mean, my mother, she calls me Andre and rolls the R. It still frightens me, and she's 91. But you think of that captain. Now, say he does that to a deck cadet or to a third mate, somebody like that, an aspiring captain. When they get to be master, they might actually use that technique.
Yeah,
He's
totally
passed
agree.
on that gem of knowledge, that gem of wisdom, because he knows that it works. He's put it into action, and he's shared it in that way. And that guy may be the mentor that makes the third mate smile at my conference, or maybe when they're captain. You see, they're sharing that knowledge. I'm sure that captain would take third mate, second mate aside if they're having problems with the crew and say, hey, you need to do this a little bit different. You need to get to know them. You need to spend just a little bit of time, not talking about the ship, talk about their family, talk about their children, recognize them as humans, on board the ship and valued members of the team. And shooting the shit with them, as he terms it, is exactly the way to do it. Take a moment, dissolve the ranks. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. I think of one captain in particular that I sailed with extensively, and particularly when I was second mate, third mate with him. I knew his family, they actually sailed with us. And he used to always come up to the bridge. When I was second mate, he always came to the bridge in the afternoon and drank a cup of tea. Around about 3:00, he'd come up. But rather than have the tea in his office where he was working, he'd come up and have it on the bridge. I know he did it with the third mate as well in the morning. And then the chief mate, he knew very well anyway, because they, worked closely together. But I knew him incredibly well. We talked politics, we talked all sorts of things during our chats, during the cups of tea. But I remember one night I called him out at 2:30 in the morning because I was surrounded by flashing white lights in the Mediterranean and I didn't know what the hell they were. But I had absolutely no problem about calling him out. He came up to the bridge, he looked around, he sniffed, and he said, "Tuna fisherman." He said, "Andre, they're a pain in the ass round here." He said, "They put flashing light whites on their nets." He said, "Anyway," he said, "don't worry about them." And he said, "I will say thank you for calling me." He said, "Because that's the first time you've ever called me."
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I remember this. Captain John Oscroft, he's crossed the bar a few years ago, I heard from one of his family. But he was a true mentor to me. He was more than a captain. He passed on wisdom that I use today, but also I had the confidence. But the thing that stands out in my mind was when he said, "Thank you for calling me." Because now, when I get called by the third mate, second mate, as I do frequently in my job now, I deal with the problem, and sometimes it's serious and that. Sometimes it's absolutely ridiculous to call me. But I never say that. I just say, "Thank you for calling me. I really appreciate you calling me. It gives me confidence that you're keeping an eye on things. Thank you," as my representative. And I learned that from him.
Yeah, it's all part of the same package in terms of mentoring. And one of the things I think is really interesting is everything we've just discussed has absolutely no involvement whatsoever with digitalization or technology at all. This is pure inspiring connections by humans that has been around for many, many years. However, it's not spoken about at these events anymore. Everybody's talking about connectivity, digitalization, and we had a conversation just before we started, and I said something to you about how there's lots of improvement that can happen in this industry, and you said to me, "Well, you got to hang on there, Carl, because you're talking for us. You're talking for us as seafarers, and quite often people are talking for seafarers." So, with that being said, I'd like to get your perspective on technological advancements. Do you think that connectivity, access to internet on board, all of these new SaaS products that are available, and training, everything's digital now? Do you think this is necessary? Do you think this is providing seafarers value? What's your perspective on that?
I think it's time that the industry takes some feedback from seafarers, because the industry is evolving very quickly. Yes, technology, I mean, I love technology. I try and not be a dinosaur, but I do love technology, but I also love traditional means of navigation. I mean, when I'm standing on the bridge wing, I have my iPhone in my hand. I have a pilot's PPU that is sending information to me, and I'm an STS mooring master, ship-to-ship mooring master. I bring two very large tankers together, 3.5 meters apart underway. And I have the most wonderful technology in my hand, but I still look across to the other ship and I see two navigation lights in line. And if they stay in line, I have a transit and I know my speeds are matched. That even if my computer is telling me they're 0.2 of a knot different, it's lying, my eyes aren't. So
Yeah,
I have a good foundation of basic knowledge that I built on, and I use technology to supplement that. What concerns me is technology is developed without seafarer input. Sometimes we have 32 different makes of ECDIS on board our ships at the moment. I think it's 32 or 34. I can screw one up in about 20 seconds if I touch it, because I don't know the traditional ones. So I will use reverse mentoring. I will ask a third mate, or preferably a cadet, if I need to use the ship's ECDIS. I ask somebody, and always a junior officer. I engage them and I ask them to show me how to do something. And I might even do that even if I know how to do it or think I know how to do it. But you engage them. So mentoring has a place in today's technology. It absolutely does. But I think, going back to your point, is that we need to take feedback from seafarers. You know, what is actually working for you? We, a few years ago, we put ballast water treatment systems on board vessels, and it became mandated that it is. But how many companies have gone back to the chief officers, chief engineers that are operating this equipment and asked them their feedback on how well it works? Do they really want to know? You know, how can they improve it? How can they make lives better? Does it actually help you? You know, do we really need it? I mean, you can understand the companies developing this technology. They make their money from it. That's how they do it. But please remember, the end user in all this is the seafarer, that is, 10,000 miles away on the other part of the world in a different hemisphere, 12 hours apart, as you are from I at the moment. Technology brings us together because you can give up your evening, I can give up my morning. There's no problem with the technology, but is it actually helping the seafarer? Is it increasing their workload? Because we can't take much more. 80% of the master's time on board, according to today's new generation seafarer, master or chief engineer, but particularly the master, 80% of their time is spent on paperwork. And at the computer, they only have 20% of the time for the ship. Wonderful ECDIS repeater in the master's cabin, just to give you an example. Companies put ECDIS on the master's desk in his cabin or her cabin so that they can see what's going on the bridge without actually going to the bridge. So they can be doing their paperwork, keeping an eye on things. Have you ever thought how detrimental that is to the third officer or second officer? Because the only time they get to see the master now is when he sees a problem on his ECDIS repeater and comes straight through the bridge door saying, "What the hell are you doing? What's going on? What's that?" The third mate maybe from Manila, from the Philippines, and the master maybe from somewhere in Europe. Eastern Bloc, they don't talk the same language as their primary language. The third mate's scared stiff, starts gibbering, trying to speak in English, explaining to the captain, just to give you an example of, I know that it did cause an accident. It's in the reports. Trying to explain to the captain that he's agreed a port-to-port passage with a vessel on the VHF in Filipino, in Tagalog, Tagalog, and not getting through to the master, who goes hard a starboard for a vessel on the port side who's actually turning to port, and they collide.
Yeah.
Just to give you an example of technology today, and people not taking a holistic view of what actually the effects of this is.
Yeah,
At
that's
least let the captain walk to the bridge if he's got a concern and see what's going on, not see what's going on. I've actually seen a master conning the vessel by handheld radio from his cabin.
Wow, that's interesting to see the mistakes that can happen with technology from an operational perspective.
But it's the human element effect.
Yeah.
The third mate's scared stiff of the captain because he only ever comes through the door bellowing at him. He's not going to call him in the middle of the night if he can help it, when he has a serious problem.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another interesting subject, is the development of microcultures. Every single vessel, from what I've learned speaking to seafarers, has a different microculture. A lot of it comes from the captain. And I think that, again, leadership skills and creating some programs and mentorship can really help improve those situations. But one of the things, going back to the conversation about connectivity, I'm really
Can I
interested
just
to hear
mention something about culture first?
Please,
because that's something
please.
I'd love to just discuss for a moment. When I was writing the new book, Mentoring at Sea, the 10-minute challenge goes on. In my first book, we talked a lot about culture being a barrier to mentoring. Now, in my experience as an active seafarer, I came off a ship last week. As an active seafarer, I don't see culture as a barrier anymore. Things have changed incredibly, particularly post-COVID. We did quite a big research into this before I published the new book as part of my research, where people who are ashore still believe that culture is a barrier and that there are still cultural problems. So I went to our Younger Members Council at the Nautical Institute and our younger members, and I asked them specifically, do you see culture as a barrier? And the incredible answer that came back was no. We see cultural difference as a positive thing. We embrace it. We engage with it. It builds the team. A diverse team, both in every way, is so much better because it brings so much more to the table. I truly believe that the barrier comes in language. There is not a cultural barrier. Very, very rare that you actually see a cultural barrier at sea, because we're all seafarers. We're all part of the maritime community, and we're all there for a specific job, getting that ship safely and commercially viably from A to B. We're all engaged in that adventure together. And the change in attitude, as I say, particularly COVID, needs to be recognized. It's immense, and it's really exciting.
Bonded by purpose.
Very much
That's
so.
it. Yeah, interesting. So going back to connectivity, and thank you for adding that point around culture, but going back to connectivity, what's your perspective on there is an increasing demand, especially with the likes of Starlink and VSAT and all these satcoms that are available out there. What's your perspective on seafarers being connected 24 hours a day, and pushing for connectivity as almost a human right now?
Absolutely.
What's your perspective on seafarers being connected nowadays, and specifically for entertainment reasons? Do you think this is a positive thing, negative thing, or can you see a side for both sides?
It's absolutely 100% positive. As far as I'm concerned, with what I see on board ships, it's as important as food or water. Clean accommodation, quiet accommodation ranks in there. Connectivity on board. Let me give you an example. About 10 days ago, I was talking to a young officer who I knew. We'd sailed before. I meet people over the years. I meet them again and again on the lightering vessels. And he'd got a family. He'd had children since we'd last met, and I'd had my granddaughter, and we're sharing pictures and that. And he's talking about it. And he said one of the things that really frightened him before he became a dad a few years ago. He'd been at sea. He'd been at sea a number of years from a young officer. He said was that I wouldn't get to see my children grow up. And he said I'd go home and they wouldn't recognize me. He said, Captain André, that's not how it is. He said, we've got our 2 kids now. One of them is young. But he said, I talk to them. I try and talk to them every day when I can. And we come up on WhatsApp, which is great for seafarers. And he said, they see me and I see them and they know me. And he said, when I went home, my youngest son ran up to me, threw his arms around me, and he said, Daddy, because he knew who I was. He'd seen me. He was away 4 months, but he'd seen him over those 4 months. He didn't have to re-engage with the family. And to me, that just summed up how vital it is these days. You imagine you as a seafarer with your young daughter, and you're going to go away for 4 or 6 months. And I've been on ships recently where everybody from the captain to the cadet to the deckhand was charged $30 for 300 megabytes. 300 megabytes, $30. $10 for 100 megabytes. And I'm not talking years ago, I'm talking months ago. When I've seen it. And I've also seen the effect 10 days ago on that young seafarer. And that young officer is going to stay at sea, I believe. They're a good officer. They're going up through the ranks. They've got their family. But because he's got this connectivity, he'll probably stay at sea. And it's down to that. You talk about retention and need.
I think a lot of the SATCOMs businesses would love to take that recording and send it over to the sales guys to send over to the shipping companies, because this is such an important way of looking at it. But just to be devil's advocate, and by no means do I believe in this, but when I do speak to shipping companies and I say, listen, I've spoke to your seafarers and they say things to me around how you only allow for certain 2-hour slots a day where you can use data. They have a switch where they go on, off, and and they put connectivity on tap, which I think is totally wrong. But when you say why, they say, well, our biggest concerns is that if we give everybody unlimited access, they're going to completely lose their camaraderie because everyone's going to go back to the cabins and do their own thing, and they're going to be looking down. No one's going to go to the mess room together. What's your perspective on that?
20 years ago, 30 years ago, we all used to meet in the bar for a drink before dinner, and we had nothing else to talk about but the problems of the day. And the captain, chief engineer, second engineer, chief steward would all be there. The mate might briefly, because he'd come down off watch, the third mate, to do a meal relief. And they'd be talking about the ship's problems. That was standard practice. British ships were built around the ship's bar, pretty much. It was a social function, and we did socialize. I am not allowed to drink at sea anymore. My company has a total ban. I have absolutely no problem with it. I've just done a month completely dry, and that's my company policy. Most companies are the same. We don't socialize. There is no more meeting, socializing. It doesn't happen. People are too busy. They very rarely get together. They meet in the mess room. And I address all this in my book. I'm not here to promote my book, but I do actually address this because it is a big problem. I'd like to see a common language spoken in mess rooms. I think that would be very good. But we need to address it. But to those people who say they don't meet socially, move on, please, and recognize the real world of seafaring. I had friends who sailed on Scandinavian ships 25 years ago and said there was no social life. Everyone from the Scandinavian countries went to the bridge, did their watch, went to their cabin and shut their door. It was the Scandinavian way. They met for meals and then went back to their cabins. Things have moved on. People socialize through social media these days, far more than they do face to face. Lord, I know if I wanted something from my children when they were little, I'd text them if they were upstairs, because they wouldn't listen to me.
Yeah.
The world has moved on. and please recognize what is going on board and what the seafarer wants. I keep coming back to that because it's incredibly important. Ask the seafarer what they want. Do they want 100% connectivity, or will it keep them awake? And another point I've got to make is that I've had companies say to me, we don't know how we're going to administer this on board. And one company in particular, I suggested to them, well, can you not let the master and chief engineer administer it like they do everything else on board?
Yeah.
And they actually had the nerve to turn around to me and say, do you think he'd be capable of that?
Wow.
I'm afraid I had to just go quiet and walk away, but I felt, there was such a lack of respect in that. We've dealt with everything else as master, in my case, or, as chief engineer and others, we've dealt with everything else on board. We deal with everything else on board. If somebody is showing signs of abusing the social media, it's going to show. It's going to show like everything else, like somebody who's drinking, like somebody who's using drugs, doing any other unsocial, activity on board. And we're going to deal with it. We've got plenty of procedures in place. We've got formal procedures to deal with this, just the same as we, do everything else on board. So set the ground lines, but give the responsibility to the vessel. You've got the internet, you've got Starlink, which is absolutely awesome. I love Starlink. It's made such a difference on the ships I've been on that have got it. But we're going to deal with it. Actually, even the junior officers that are incredibly responsible, well-educated people. They're quite capable of time management as well, with a little guidance from the captain or from their senior officers.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think it'd be really interesting to see a world where this responsibility was also given to the masters, and ultimately they were the ones who manage it, because I think just like everything else, if it was within their hands, I think that you wouldn't have to worry. The shipping companies would not have to worry about these so-called situations that would arise around developing antisocial behaviour on board. But what I would say to finish things off is that it does appear that we're going in the right direction. It does appear that, generally speaking, most of the things we're talking about are positive.
Absolutely. I think, if I may, I think one of the things is gender on board, where we're not actually giving the right story. We're not actually talking about the good that is going on. I boarded a ship in my last watch, so say 3 weeks ago, that had a female chief officer, had a female third officer, and had a female deck cadet, just in the deck department. That is not actually unusual. What is unusual for me in my company is going on board a vessel that hasn't got females on board, or at least one, female, but usually more than one. And we're still promoting, dare I say, the bad side of it. And I don't say that that was a bad thing. The previous president to myself of the Nautical Institute, Gillian Carson-Jackson, did a wonderful job of raising the awareness of this. She, it was superb what she did, bringing people's attention to what was going on at sea, along with the rest of the industry, and I'm referring, of course, to Midshipman X and the like, that was brought to our attention. And something has been done about that. The profile has been raised. But now, please, for goodness sake, let's look at what good looks like. I was sent a picture of a supply vessel that we work with down in South America. The master, chief mate, second mate, third mate, and the mooring master are all female. The whole deck crew are female on that boat. This is what good looks like. And let's start recognizing that women at sea are there, and it's good. We keep hearing this 2%. It's still 2%. But I wonder, is that figure actually correct these days? Have we had a recent statistic? And does it take into account the number of seafarers that has increased in the industry over the years, from when it was first 2%, with maybe 1.2 million, to now 2% to 1.6 billion, or 1.8 million, sorry, billion, million. Have we actually got that? Or are we still focusing on, dare I say, the negative side of this
Yeah,
and
I
not the
agree.
positive side?
I agree. I actually stopped quoting that statistic because I question it as well. Actually,
Mm,
I had a conversation with a big ship management company today, and they were telling me, they were showing me some of the case studies of some of these fantastic female seafarers they have, especially coming out of South America. Brazil seems to produce a lot of female seafarers, Africa as well,
yeah.
um, and many other labour markets. But I agree. Actually, I think it'd be interesting, and perhaps it's still around that figure, but I'd be interested to see an updated figure around that percentage. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about diversity, but I'm going to respect your time and finish off with one last question, which is future seafarers, future maritime professionals, future cadets. What is the one piece of advice you would give them as someone that is, spent a 40-year plus career at sea? What was one piece of advice you would give to future professionals?
When you're considering going to sea, be very careful which course you choose. And I'm talking globally, but I'm particularly focusing on India and Asia from my experience there. Be very careful that within that course, it is guaranteed that you will have a shipping company to give you your 12-month statutory sea time to gain your STCW qualification along with your diploma HND degree. Look at it very, very carefully and make sure that it's in place, that you're not going to get your degree after 3 years. You're going to get your BSc, and then you're going to be fighting to try and find a ship because the college doesn't support you, or so many shipping companies want to train, if they're going to take cadets, want to take their own cadets, and they take them before they go to college, and then they designate the college they go to. That's what happened to me, a number of years ago, and that's still happening. And we see wonderful things. I visited the Anglo-Eastern College in Mumbai last year. Fantastic. They had 700 cadets there, but they are all guaranteed to get through their cadetship as long as they're successful. It's a two-way thing. The cadet has to be successful. It's not a free ride. If you're not going to put the time in and do the work, then you're not going to get through. It's a two-way contract. But the contract is there that they will, if they achieve the results academically, will get the sea time. There's no guarantee of a job. I don't say that there's going to be a guarantee of a job. I think that may be pushing it one too far. But
Yeah,
if you're with a good company like that, then there's many, many good companies in this world. I'm a part of one. You're pretty sure of a job at the end of it because we need officers. But that would be my advice. Look very carefully, please. Don't take the plunge into it and then regret it at the end of the year. If you're not doing a degree course and you want a degree course, it won't be too late. I did my degree. I never had a degree when I went to sea. My degree came, I think I started it when I was 42. I did a master's degree and I did it all online. So it's not the end of the world. But please, look at that really carefully. The last count I had in Iberia, there was 571 cadets that had got their academic qualifications, were looking to get on a ship in Spain and Portugal and that area. That's a frightening figure. You're better in the UK, I know you are. And the industry has changed here in America. There's a huge call for officers now, but we've got so few ships. But, other parts of the world, I've seen it. I've seen a college, a country where there's 400, and that country, 400 cadets, and that country has 6 ships. The chances you getting on a ship is really slim. So please, look very carefully, take advice. There's plenty of us out here that are prepared to mentor you, help you, become a student member of the Nautical Institute. You'll have access to a huge resource there that can also help you as well.
it's clear to see just how passionate you are about doing everything you can to pass on your experience and your knowledge to the next generation. And it's really, really amazing to see. And I think actually other industries can learn from people like yourselves as well, because I don't think enough is done actually as a whole to really, really invest in the next generation. And it takes certain individuals like yourself, Captain, to really inspire and yeah, give that a little bit extra. Thank you so much for your time. This is a huge honor for me, and I
And
hope
for me.
as many I hope as many seafarers as possible can see this. I'll be making sure to share this among my network. This has been one of my favorite episodes to record, packed full of tons of knowledge and some fantastic gems. So thank you so much again for taking the time, and I hope that we meet each other again in person somewhere in some corner of planet Earth eventually.
I look forward to that, Carl. And I just want to say thank you to you for what you're doing. Because we do recognize you, another, dare I call you a social influencer? Is that the right term? But what you're doing in the industry for us, the seafarers are seeing you. You're raising the concerns and you're not afraid to. You're actually speaking for the seafarers and you're taking time to go out and meet them. And I've watched some of the work that you've done. So thank you to you as well for what you're doing. It's been an honor for me to come and talk with you, and I look forward to meeting you. I wish you every success in what you've got going on in the future. And I think, we're perhaps going to meet up there as well. So I look forward to that, Carl.
Yeah, likewise. I think just to close, I think if I could go back in time and I found this option as a career, I mean, Warsash was on my doorstep. There was once a time where in Portsmouth, where I grew up, we used to go to the port and wave to all of the boats as they came through. So maritime has always been closely related to me. But I do sometimes think that maybe not serving at sea is somewhat a disadvantage to trying to be able to give my opinion on those that I've never experienced the careers of. But I do think equally at the same time that if I can offer something, a different way of looking at things, but still with the focus of, and all I want to do is focus on value providing for seafarers in any way I possibly can. So working with people like yourselves and some of the fantastic charities out there in the next generation that are coming through, if I can offer anything, even if I haven't had the ability to spend time at sea myself, I will do just that. And one thing I know for certain is that this is the career for me, and I hope to spend the rest of my life in maritime helping seafarers.
Yeah, you see, you're not a seafarer, but you're a member of the maritime community in what you're doing. So you're actually bonded by the sea. The sea has a huge influence, and it's not just, you can take an admiralty lawyer, they're part of the maritime community. Somebody, flag states and working in IMO and that, you're supporting seafarers, and you truly are supporting seafarers because you're listening to them. We're able to share our concerns through you and perhaps make a difference. And that's what it's all about, is actually making a difference. I truly believe, we're put on this. You are what you leave behind. A Greek master told me that at 3:00 in the morning on his ship where we had a real serious problem. And we were talking about families and that. But it resonated with me in what I do with the mentoring, what I do with the Nautical Institute. You are what you leave behind. And I think as a father, as a grandfather, and as a seafarer, that's so terribly true.
Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, Carl. And mine.